Good afternoon, PSD raters and guests. Wow, we got not just our raters that are in our provider group today, but we do have a number of guests in here today. So welcome everybody. Glad to see everybody making their way in. I'm going to wait another minute or two here, another couple more seconds. Let people funnel in before we'll start with some announcements and whatnot, and then we'll move into to our presentation today, which we have David here from Ekotrope, and we have Sarah, who's going to be in background from Ekotrope as well. So we're very glad to have them here today for scenario modeling. And sorry if I keep looking up, but I'm just kind of watching on another screen. So I think we're all kind of getting used to that now. All right, got a lot of people coming in here. Welcome. All right, just give this another second or two because it really looks like a lot of people rolling in here. So I want to try to get everybody in. All right, seeing some familiar names and some not familiar names, so that's good. All right, oh, I see David and Chaz and some of our regulars in here. All right, very good. All right, looks like we're starting to level off a little bit as far as people coming in. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll get started on some updates, just some industry stuff that I want to go over before we get into scenario modeling. People have been asking about, you're seeing the SEER2 equipment come through, getting your AHRI certificates that have SEER2 on it. Just a reminder, if you're using Ekotrope, they do have the drop down for the SEER2 and other programs that you might be using out there, since we do have people who use different programs in our group and beyond our group. Again, yielding to our guests that we have on here today. We just making sure we are recording. Yeah, so there is a conversion. There's a conversion table that has come out in addendum, MNHERS Addendum 71. So you will need to convert your SEER2 into SEER. It's going to look a little bit weird right away. You're going to think that the numbers are off. But once you make the conversion, if you have any problems making the conversions or understanding what you need to do, let us know. Reach out. We're happy to help with that. We do have some folks who are getting kind of either back into Energy Star or new Energy Star and zero energy ready homes and whatnot, due to 45L and other tax incentive changes. So, you know, a couple things that we're seeing there is just kind of getting your legs back under you if you've been a while or if you're new to using those above code programs. We're going to do some more work. We'll do some more training, kind of get down into like the field elements of what that looks like. You know, what do I need to take with me? What am I looking at when I'm going around the house? Different things like that. HVAC quality installation, standard 310. We're seeing more and more people asking about that and looking into that. So for our internal PSD member, rater members, we do have up on the help desk the whole layout as to how that goes and what you need to do to become qualified for HVAC quality installation. I am reaching out to some other people across the industry to try to streamline some processes and help make the field work a little bit easier to comprehend and kind of get used to. So look for some more things to come out there. Another big one that we want to touch base on here today also is the end of the presidential proclamation for the COVID-19 restrictions, right? So that's due to end May 11th, which means 30 days after that, we go back to our normal standards, pre-COVID standards, which will have some changes to it with our remote QAs and things like that. We're operating, there are some amendment proposals that have been submitted, and there's some other things in the work to, you know, there could be some changes come out before then, but we're operating as far as PSD is concerned under the assumption that come June 11th, we're going to be back to pre-COVID standards, unless we hear, you know, something differently or something else comes out about that. So So we're just going to go right into it. You know, the reason that we're having this webinar today, or the subject matter of our webinar today, is the scenario modeling in Ekotrope. It's an interesting addition to their Ekotrope RATER program. We've been testing it a little bit here as far as our QA staff, and finding it, you know, pretty interesting. I think it's definitely a tool that can be very useful, especially, you know, we have most of our raters that are either doing code or above code programs and different things that you need to keep your builders, you know, in the know, and what are the upcoming changes going to look like. And you know how we do, we go in there, we either, if we're in Ekotrope, we might, the way I typically would do it is just to go into one of my projects and duplicate that within the project and run scenarios that way, running individual models. Or if I'm not working in Ekotrope, maybe I'm creating individual models and creating different scenarios there, you know, as far as to try to capture that information and make it useful. But with scenario modeling, it's a little bit different track, you know, a little bit different take, where you can take either one project or one model or multiple models and put in some different scenarios, make some changes to different components, different updates that you might want to make, you know, and different strategies that you might want to take with your builders and other stakeholders that you're having discussions with, as far as, you know, running different scenarios in your for your models. So before we get too far into what our findings have been, or what our struggles were maybe coming up to speed, or what we're finding to be very useful about the tool, here we go. We got David here. Again, David Pedrick, thank you so much for your time today and coming here to talk to us and our raters about scenario modeling. So I'll hand it over to you.
Great, yeah, thanks, Cindy. You did a great job explaining what scenario modeling is. And what I'm going to do here is we're going to do a little bit of a demo to make sure everybody understands how it works, what it looks like, kind of what time it takes to do a scenario modeling analysis project. And then after that, we'll kind of have a conversation to talk about what your experience was using it for the past week or two, and then also kind of talking some kind of hypotheticals. We know that you know your rater business, or your raters business, quite well, and we want to kind of ask you a few questions about how you think your raters could use this for, you know, analysis projects that they may be completing. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And it looks like we got it up there. And so scenario modeling, like Cindy says, is a tool to analyze different design changes across 1 or up to 1,000 energy models at a time. So what you're able to do is say, the builder calls you up and says, hey, I can't get this product. What if I install this product instead? And they're like, am I still going to pass energy code? Is my HERS index going to be impacted? And if they have lots of homes, it may be difficult to understand how that impacts every single home. If they have to have just one, it's probably pretty easy to just go in and make the change pretty quickly. So we've made scenario modeling for those big changes, those big analysis projects, for calls like that, but also some other use cases to help plan or help find the exact specification for multifamily construction. So to start out, I'm going to give it a little demo. Right here, I've pulled up a bunch of Ekotrope energy models. I just searched by a builder, DR Horton, that we all know. I'm going to select 10 energy models and get into scenario modeling. So this brings up this kind of user interface right here. And we have a list on the left-hand side of all of the design changes that we want to make. And on the right-hand side, an edit screen, so we can edit those design changes. We have a bunch of different types of changes you can make, like an infiltration change. So I'm going to say what happens if all of these homes were modeled to 2 ACH50, and then what if all of their walls were replaced with a 2x6 R19 bat, and what if the heating system was replaced with an air source heat pump connected to forced air, variable speed, and was a, let's say 16 HSPF, and it's a split system. So I'm going to add another one, and you can continue adding these on and on. The cool part of this is that these are changes that will be temporarily made to all 10 of these energy models that you can see in the upper left-hand corner. And the change will be made, the impact of it will be analyzed, and then the change will be unmade, and the results will be sent to you. So you don't have to make any of the individual changes, and it can make dozens of changes all at once very quickly, and you don't ever accidentally leave a change unchanged, which I know I've done when I've been doing this for multifamily homes, where you're trying to figure out how to get it to pass an energy code. You make a change and you forget to undo it, and then that's persisted, and you're chasing down what that error is as you move on down with the project. So we have a bunch of different design changes here, all the building envelope components, windows, HVAC systems, and infiltration. I'm gonna take these 3 design changes, and then the next step here is we allow you to group these design changes into groups. So if you were to imagine these design changes are ingredients, each scenario is a recipe, so like how you combine those design changes. The first design change I'm going to do is say, let's apply everything at once. And I'm going to rename this to say all design changes. And following that, I'm going to say add each design change as its own individual scenario. So this says, let's just change the infiltration, and then let's just change the walls, and let's just change the mechanical equipment. So this allows you to see the individual impact of each thing. You can make up to 20 different scenarios like this out of 15 different design changes. So as we move on, the last thing we need to say is how do we want to analyze these projects? Kind of what's important to us. So we may be concerned about the HERS score or Energy Star version 3.1 for the 45L tax credit. We have a few state codes, and these are kind of based on when people ask us to add new codes, we go ahead and add new codes. We are also working on adding some rebate programs. The Duke Hero program in North Carolina is going to be added. And so as people request, we can add these into the analysis. Let's see here. Maybe I'll do DOE Zero Energy Ready as well. So then I review and submit. And this shows me a little summary of what's going to happen. And when I press finish, it's going to start analyzing these projects. So in this case, I'm analyzing 10 different projects and applying 1, 2, 3, 4 scenarios. And that means we're going to actually analyze 50 different combinations. The first combination is the no change scenario. And then after that, it's going to be 10 of the first, 10 of the second, 10 of the third, and 10 of the fourth for every single project. So it's doing a whole bunch of analysis right now. And in a minute or two, it's going to email me the results of the analysis. The results are a spreadsheet. I'm going to unshare my screen for a moment as I go to my inbox to get this download. And the results are in a spreadsheet that you can manipulate and analyze and do anything that you want with. It's a little bit raw, but it is fairly useful to analyze everything once it's there. So I just got the notification that it's been sent, and I see it. So you see it took maybe 2 minutes or so to analyze all of those projects. Mind you, that was 50 different changes. And if it's even more, if you start counting the design changes. And this is what the results look like. So it is a big spreadsheet of all of the results. If we scroll down here, we see it goes to 49, which is 50 if you start counting at 0. And we have all sorts of information here. We have project ID, we have the scenario ID to tell us what the scenario name was, some information about the project, city, state, zip, builder, building type, and size. I'm going to hide all of these momentarily. And then when we look at this, we have a whole bunch of cool data here. First, we have the HERS score. This is the HERS score with all of the significant digits that we calculate. It's not rounded like an official HERS score is. And then after that, we have the HERS score change. So this is how much this particular scenario changed the HERS index. And actually, I shouldn't have hid the name there. So let me undo that. So the all design change scenario here reduced the HERS index by 5 index points. So that's pretty cool. That gives us an idea of how much it moved. You can see the math here. You know, -5 seems about the same as 73 minus 67. Once we start to get to energy code programs like Energy Star or energy codes or rebate programs, we have even more data. First, we have the compliance. 0 meaning fail, 1 meaning pass. We have the compliance of the original plan, so you can compare it to did it change from pass to fail or fail to pass. And then we have this thing called buffer. And buffer is this really interesting value that is in Ekotrope. And this shows you how far away the home is from passing Energy Star. So if it's at -26%, it means the difference between the Energy Star target and this home's HERS score is 26 points. This HERS score is actually 26% above the target. And in the all change one, it's -17. So the all change, it got us 9% closer, 9% points closer to passing. So you can see kind of the directionality and the impact of this. It didn't quite get us to Energy Star passing, but it got us closer. Given that I just kind of made these things up and I knew nothing about the energy models to begin with, you know, if I knew more, I could have a better, well-tuned design change to you know, better fine-tune it and see how that gets us closer. So we have the same thing for DOE Zero Energy Ready, and that's the results. Most people will take these results and insert into a pivot table. It's just a little kind of snazzy little way to analyze results in Excel. And we do this, there we go. We see the average HERS score for each different scenario, and we can do a little bit more analysis there. So that's basically everything here. You'll see that there is every single energy model and design or scenario listed here. So you can start to slice and dice this however you would like. That's the demo. Feel free to put any questions you have in the chat, and Sarah will be reviewing some of those questions and kind of bringing them up as they come up or at the end. But right now we're going to talk to Cindy to see how Cindy's experience and Cindy's team's experience was using scenario modeling. Sorry, Cindy, right before that, I kind of want to explain a little bit, one more thing.
No problem.
What I told Cindy is that we've seen users do kind of 4 different use cases for scenario modeling. One is a value engineering exercise where your builder may call you up and say, hey, I can't get this product, what about this one? Or you may be sitting in a design meeting and they're making product choices and you need to analyze those quickly. So there's kind of a value engineering use case. The other is like an impact analysis for builder change. And this is actually kind of what I mean by if a builder calls you up and says, hey, what happens here if I do this instead of that? Then the other use case is you may be working with a builder who is like, I'm interested in meeting this energy code, or I'm interested in meeting this tax credit. How do I get there? And they may be asking you for that analysis on one energy model or for all of their house plans. And you could use this to quickly iterate on a bunch of different design changes that they're willing to make to verify whether or not the things they're willing to do will get them to energy code or to their target. And finally, kind of interesting use case that is kind of niche, but some people have done sensitivity analysis with scenario modeling, where there are people out in the field may have a chart that says if the blower door for this house plan is 3 ACH, the duct leakage has to be this in order to pass. So they have this like kind of create like matrix. The way I think of it is like on the back of an atlas that you may have had in your car before Google Maps. And there's this like chart that says I'm driving here to there, and you look to see how many miles it was. They have a chart like that for blower door and duct leakage results, and you can make it with this pretty easily. But that's kind of a crazy example. So with that, I want to talk to Cindy. Cindy, generally, kind of what was your experience? How did it go?
Yeah, so you know, I went in. The first thing is always getting used to how things go, and getting used to, you know, pushing the different buttons and whatnot. I think one of the questions we even had was like, you know, how did we even get in there? Which is, you know, basically I just went into my projects, picked the projects, and then hit scenario modeling at the bottom, which most people won't have unless you have the premium program. So anyhow, just kind of getting used to the buttons, making it work. You know, it started off maybe a little bit heavy with choosing multiple projects and multiple scenarios, and then I got the big spreadsheet and was like, oh boy, what am I going to do with that? Trying to understand the buffers and what, you know, all of that information really meant. But once I started, you know, I broke it down into like a single unit, multiple scenarios, kind of got my feet under me that way. But the typical scenarios that I would run in the field when I was out in the field doing ratings, or what we see with most of our raters, are for code compliance, 45L, you know, things that you touched base on, which is above code programs, things like that. So the scenarios that I ran, and I know some other team members of ours have been running, were based on, you know, just kind of pushing it against those types of programs. So yeah, interesting finds. You know, we found it. I don't know how far you want me to go here. I could probably talk about this for a while, but
yeah. How did so you said to try and figure out how to pass 45L or an energy code, and how do you or your raters do that today? If you're kind of just trying to achieve a goal and you don't know how you're going to get there, kind of what's your process today?
Yeah, so in Ekotrope, I guess the old method is really just going into each building model and creating a different, you know, a duplicate design and doing some scenarios there. And I've had those probably 6, 7 deep before, especially if we're talking about, you know, new upcoming codes and we're trying to talk to different, you know, maybe states or whatever about their implementation, and they want to run different scenarios for those types of things, or even as a rater, just trying to, you know, bring a builder up to speed with what the upcoming code might be. So yeah.
So if you make a new house plan, and in each house plan it's a particular change in that house plan, when you're doing that, kind of how do you decide which changes you want to make?
Most of the time it's based on knowing the builder. You know, a lot of times, you know, the builders and things that, you know, discussions. I mean, truthfully, to even have discussions with builders, we almost have to run scenarios, right? So we look at the new code, or what, you know, a lot of pushback sometimes is, you know, oh, people don't think that they're going to want to do continuous insulation. So how can we get around that? If we beef up the, you know, the ceiling insulation, you know, are we going to be able to hit our backstops? You know, if we do this particular design in the wall and we beef up the ceiling, you know, can we make our UA alternatives? You know, things like that we're going to kind of look at to give out to the builder and say, okay, here are the different scenarios that we've been running, you know, based on knowing you and how you build, or maybe you're a new builder, you know, having to have that discussion of, you know, in order to make this program or code requirement, here are the things that are must-haves. You're going to have to do this. But, you know, here are some selections, you know, we need to have a discussion on what you want or are willing to do.
Yeah. So whether it's written down or not, you kind of have a recipes that you like to try for a builder, because you understand what you have a feeling for what they're willing to try, You know where you can maybe push the boundary, or you're currently trying to push the boundary. And with scenario modeling, then kind of how would you do the same process?
Well, with scenario modeling, well, makes
Yeah.
it a lot easier, I have to say, at first glance and first use here, is that now I can just take either that one building or multiples, right? Maybe I have a number of different, maybe I have a builder that builds, 4, 5, 6 different typical units, and I can take those typical units and run scenarios on all of them at the same time. I think last night I sat and I ran like 13 at a time or 15 at a time, and it was, really came out really well. And I was able to see each model type and what the different scenarios, the outcomes of those scenarios were.
Yeah. What are there any drawbacks? I imagine there's got to be for using scenario modeling rather than being in the UI. Kind of, did you see anything that you wish you could have done?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. When I first got the spreadsheet and stuff, there was some of my initial thoughts were, I like using spreadsheets. I don't mind doing pivot tables and making charts and things like that. It'd be a very useful tool. With the raw data, it can be very useful. Wondering that, maybe depending on, the comfort level of different users, what's their comfort level with using that? Would some sort of report be available, or something where they could, it'd be nice to have a button where we could say, how do I make this house past 45L? But, that's kind of that would be like a pretty wild thing, I imagine. So I think as far as the way this works, I think it's probably the best way to use it to allow it to be able to work, with the exception of possibly reports.
Yeah. It really optimizes what your existing workflow is, makes it faster. But I agree that the spreadsheet can be cumbersome. So what we've heard from kind of our early customers and have been that they've gotten comfortable using the spreadsheet, but they also would prefer something better. And so we were keeping an eye on that. And we always ask people, it's kind of like, we have limited resources to implement new functionality to scenario modeling. And so far, we've always prioritized adding new types of design changes or new codes and programs, because those seem to be always the most prioritized, needed things. But we're about to round that corner where we're in a pretty good spot where we'll start focusing on how those results are actually delivered. And hopefully we'll see some changes there. But we're focused on primarily getting you the analysis and being able to analyze the type of things that you want to analyze. And that brings up another question. Are there types of design changes that you couldn't make that you would want to make using scenario modeling?
That I think we might need a little bit more time on. I know that I think in our version we were having, like the mechanicals I think are being worked on right now. I noticed that you were just using the mechanical drop down scenarios though. Is that something?
Yeah, no, it's good to go. There's two different types of mechanical changes. One is a little bit more complex than the other. So we have had people trip up on the complex one. I know I tripped up on it a lot initially too, but the second one is much more straightforward, and you saw it worked in our demo right here.
Yeah, so we'll be definitely using that. Other applications that I could see that we would love to see rolled out are for utility programs where maybe we have savings over code that we need to add, or with upcoming CO2e indexes and things like that, where we're going to want to compare to some of those types of scenarios. So hopefully in the future.
Yeah. So we've kind of talked about 4, maybe 3 actually different use cases: the value engineering, the phone call from your builder, and how to plan to get a builder to meet a goal. How often have you seen the need for those things? And how often do you think your raters get phone calls or you know, the need to do that analysis? Is it just tied to code changes, or is it more throughout the year getting requests from builders?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it has to do with code changes. Now, when we think about code changes, though, we have to think about the complexity of that. It's not just 2021 IECC, it's stretch code here, it's adoptions of this, that, and the other thing there. So I see that you do have some different states that are starting to populate in scenario modeling, which I think will be very useful. You know, bulk programs with 45L changes, you know, we see a lot of that right now. We're going to have a influx of, you know, additional Energy Star requirements and things like that. But those are our primary, outside of the utility programs, where most of our raters would likely be using this tool.
Yeah.
Your question.
And I guess if they had the tool, like, not even thinking about the tool, but just that analysis of going in and making edits and seeing how the impact is. Do you have a sense of kind of how often you do that? Is that something that somebody does weekly, monthly, like once a quarter, or kind of, you know, how often do you think people do that?
Well, I feel like it's almost constant, you know, especially, I mean, particularly when you're working, you know, one-off custom builders here and there, not going to be, you know, very useful. Where a couple of places I do see it, production builders and stuff like that, or builders, even if they're not large production builders, you know, working with a builder or architect, design professionals that, you know, do constant work that may have similar characteristics to their homes. But another one I think coming up that, you know, with some of the changes in major additions and tier 3 alterations, things like that, we're having a lot of people that are kind of struggling with starting to get information from the field regarding, you know, hey, I have part of this existing home and I'm, you know, trying to figure out, you know, how we can make this work with the new stretch codes and whatnot. And I think that this tool could be helpful, and I'd have to play with it more for this, but in helping to work around those scenarios for, you know, a little more complex with these units.
Yeah. The other place that I've seen people have success with scenario modeling is with multifamily homes. And it's been a while since I've done any multifamily modeling, but from what I can recall, I would have a set of worst case units or unit types that I know we're either doing sampling on, or you're going to copy and make new templates. And it always seemed like multifamily developers required more changes to energy models than anybody else, because they were constantly, you know, tweaking their specification and mechanical systems. And they often, I was working in affordable housing, had more stringent requirements to meet. And I don't know if you've seen a similar experience or had a similar experience with multifamily, and whether or not, at least I think this would have been helpful in that use case, but if you had any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this definitely useful for multifamily applications, you know, where you, like you said, we have, you know, maybe, I don't know, anywhere from 4 to 15 or more different unit types, and then multiples of those units. So with scenario modeling, you know, this could definitely be helpful. Or change orders, right? There's constant change orders in these construction types a lot of times. So, you know, helping with that, with, you know, midpoint changes. You go out to a midpoint inspection, all of a sudden some things that change, somebody didn't call you up, or maybe they are calling you up and saying, hey, we have this change order that we need to update because of something with the code or some local requirement or some new program maybe that they can, you know, be involved in. And, you know, being able to now take multiple models and run those scenarios on is, you know, it's so much easier than going into each one of those, even unit types, and making those changes. And one thing, you know, as far as one fear that I had to work past when I started running these things is that I'm not going to break anything. So I just want everybody to know that it does not change the model when you do this. So you can run scenarios on active models and it's not going to change it. I think that was kind of my biggest fear actually going into this thing.
Yeah, but that brings up another point that we've talked about before is if you analyze a change, like a midpoint inspection, where you've gone out and observed that something's different than what was expected, and you want to see how does that change their performance? Determining how it impacts performance is half of the battle in that situation, because if you test it and they still pass, you still need to change the energy models.
Right, yeah.
Right? And so there's kind of two ways or one way you can do that now, or two ways. You can do it by hand. We have batch modifications. We could go and do a batch modification. But what we intend to do is once we get to a spot where we have a pretty good steady set of design changes, make sure that you can make all of the same batch modifications that you can as a design change, and then also allow you to save a scenario so that you can go to batch modifications and say, apply this scenario to your energy models. So once you found a scenario that works, you can just tell Ekotrope to make those changes automatically, and you won't have to actually go into the energy model and make the change yourself.
Yeah, I can see where that would be useful for projects that are in the preliminary or active stages. If I were running scenarios, David, on models that are already registered, let's say I just want to run it on already registered models, and I don't want to make those changes to those models.
Yep.
Would it be easy enough, or do you guys foresee building in some sort of a function where I could say, create my models based on this model that I ran? I mean, maybe we're asking for a lot here, but since we're talking about this,
I've not heard that request yet.
Okay.
But I can see the use of that, and I can immediately think of a workaround to make that.
Okay.
That would be in our pipeline, but if I can think of a workaround that quickly, it means we probably could also build it as well. I'm not going to rule it out. It's just a matter of finding the time and like the broad use case there, but that sounds really cool.
Yeah, no, and if there's a quick workaround, then we'll do that too. So that's what we do in modeling, right?
Yeah. So I'm just looking through some of my questions here. I don't know if I've asked directly, but is there anything that you wanted to do in scenario modeling that you couldn't do right now? In terms of maybe a type of evaluation metric or codes or program or design change that you want to make that you couldn't?
Not so far.
Okay, but it sounds like there's probably some regional codes that aren't in there yet.
Yeah, as far as being able to choose what we're looking against, you mean in the scenario when we get to the.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Sometimes I get stuck in our internal jargon on an evaluation metric.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see, taking a look at questions here. So we got some, when does it go live? Is there additional cost? Things like that going on.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we can take some audience questions.
Okay.
Were those your questions? Or,
oh no, I'm reading over the questions here while we're going.
Yeah.
Let's see. Resonant has 4 virtual models. Oh, okay, that's a different question. When does this go live? Is it additional cost? So it is a premium product. Go through your software or your provider, I guess, on that.
Yep.
I'll let you speak on that if you want to.
Yeah. So always feel free to contact Ekotrope about that. But we are going through our traditional channel where we sell to the provider and the provider provides the software. So if you're a member of a third-party provider, you would be kind of packaged in with your third-party provider there. And the pricing for scenario modeling is variable based on how many confirmed ratings you complete. We're using that kind of as a proxy of how often you'd use the tool. So If you're a larger company, you're paying a little bit more. If you're a smaller company, you're paying a little bit less to try and keep that pricing scaled to your use and the kind of value that you're getting out of it.
All right, great, thank you. Let's see, here's one, Dave. Got two Daves, got Dave presenter and Dave question. Sounds like scenario modeling requires a really good knowledge of Excel. I don't know how to create a pivot table, so this showstopper, can RATER outsource to someone, etc. So yeah, so I'll go ahead and respond to that, and then if you want to add in to David, am I echoing? Am I just now noticing that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Just do something here. So yeah, I mean, you can just go across the Excel spreadsheet and you can find your information. It's very easy to see. When David was showing the pivot table, it's just something that if you use Excel a lot, it's something that you're kind of used to doing. But certainly even not really, somebody doesn't really use Excel too much, I think could definitely go across the line items and figure out what's going on pretty easily. But we can certainly, we'll provide support for any raters that we have to help out with that if they're interested in this. But
yeah, we provide.
Do you have any more on that? You're
we
muted.
Provide a little bit of,
oh, wait a minute, I'm muted. Okay.
We provide a little bit of support for doing that as well. And I have a little bit of a spreadsheet that I've made that you can paste your results into that will do some analysis for you to make it a little bit easier. It's not quite as flexible as just the raw spreadsheet, but we have some options there to help you out.
All right, great. Yeah, I'd love to see that. It says a common upgrade in our area to consider a spray foamed roof line. Yep, definitely. The implications of this one change can ripple through the model. For example, insulation along the roof is typically lower R value. Surface area of the roof will change. The envelope volume is different. The infiltration is often tighter and the ducts are now inside the envelope. Is there any way for all this to be done in one scenario? I love this question, Mike. Thank you so much for asking this.
Yeah,
I'll leave it to you, David.
This is a tough one. So you can update the ceiling type from actually, sorry, let me take a step back. You can move the ducts, their location. You can bring them into condition space. Changing the surface area of a ceiling is not possible right now. And changing the infiltration volume is not either. What I'll say though is that being able to change the ceiling area can be possible in the future. Changing the infiltration volume will be messy or muddy because if you're modeling homes of different sizes, each home will need a different amount of additional infiltration volume. So we could theoretically have it change that does update the infiltration volume, but it would have to operate under some assumption of if the home is this big, add this amount of infiltration volume. So it wouldn't be able to be precise. But I know that's like a common like wish. So I'd be willing to work with people that need that to figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah, I can see where that would definitely, that's a tough one. It's a tough one to, like you said, to make all those changes with the push of a button. Running a single model, if we had the inputs, we could do it, but I can't imagine running, I mean, all the houses would really have to be very close in size in order to probably do that.
So everything other than like adding volume is very doable. Not exactly right now, but in the future, it can be added. And So it's a kind of a muddy answer, but there's multiple stages there of possible, and then there have to be some sort of a fudge factor maybe applied.
Yeah, I think any of those factors would have to be pretty conservative. That way we're not, you know, saying something will pass and then all of a sudden we get out there and now, you know, everybody's knocking on your door and running to Boston to find you guys or something. We don't want to have that. We do have one. Thanks, Tom, for asking. Can you email out the spreadsheet to look at? It was hard to see on the small screen. I don't know if you want to make yours available. If not, I can kind of make some that I ran generic and put it up on our help desks for people to have.
Yeah. Sure, I can share mine, no problem.
All right, great. That would be great. You may have showed this earlier, but are the different model scenarios based on the project level or the building design level, i.e. one project with 6 different building designs versus 6 different projects? That's a great question, Owen. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, the analysis is done on the primary or master house plan. So that is a good question. If you store a bunch of house plans in one project, it's not analyzing all of the others. I have that as like something other people have asked as well, is to be able to analyze everything in that every single house plan. So it's doable, and you know, I'll add one more person to that list of requesting that feature.
There we go. See, that's the benefit of having these types of meetings. It's great.
Yeah, you get feedback all the time. It's great.
Yeah, no, this is definitely awesome. And so just to kind of make sure that we're clear on that, it's whichever one you have selected with the blue ribbon or the one that's the primary model is the one that's going to be analyzed at this point, unless further. This is great. I love, throw some more questions in there if you have them. I'm trying to think, let me look at my little feedback list here too, see if there's anything I think would be great to add here. 45L codes, local utilities. Did I find it easy to use? I'm just going on some of the questions that you kind of sent over. Yes, I've actually found it really easy to use. You know, again, initially just kind of getting up to speed with things, figuring out what the different exports that you're talking about, those buffers was very helpful to try to, you know, put my head around exactly what all that means. You know, we certainly have more work to do here to try to figure out whether we have more questions or not. I talked about the report versus spreadsheet, I think would be a nice addition. But yeah, I just found it really interesting when I was running some models that, you know, because I did just like you did, right? I grabbed some different changes. I made one scenario where it's like everything, and then the other one's just single components or maybe 2 components for that scenario. And to kind of, then I graphed it out, you know, like, oh, how did that change or series of changes for that unit? And what I was really finding in some of those surprising changes were that in some scenarios, just picking 1 or 2 components got me there. I didn't have to choose them all, or, you know, maybe in some house types or orientations or whatever the differences were, is that, you know, these passed with these 2 components, but for the other, you know, couple houses it took another component, or, you know, maybe everything. So it was really kind of cool to allow that to happen within a matter of minutes. I think a lot of, especially when I was running, you know, 13, 15 different models at the same time under 4 or 5 scenarios, I mean, that would have taken hours, if not days, you know, to run through that stuff. So this is where, you know, I know that there's probably some kinks to work through, or, you know, just the way, just like we do with the software anyway, is we have different things that we find in the field and we have to figure out how to model it. Just kind of same thing here, is just kind of getting used to that workflow and then figuring that thing out. But yeah, I think there's a lot of good potential here. Cool.
Yeah, so I'll wrap up here and say kind of a few things that we're working on adding, and to give you kind of an idea of what's coming down the roadmap. Obviously, we have people using it as it is right now and finding it quite useful. But there's always things that can be improved. So one, we're adding a few codes. When I said North Carolina hero, I don't know if there's anybody from North Carolina, South Carolina here. We're also adding the ability to just change the duct system by itself. So you could say, just move the ducts into condition space, or just change the duct leakage values. Right now, you have to do that in conjunction with the heating and cooling systems. Then in terms of how you analyze the impact of these, we're adding utility cost and energy consumption data, so you can see how a change will impact the homeowner's utility cost. And we're adding in a design change to change the Ekotrope algorithm version to analyze. So if you're needing to change from one version to the next because of the kind of the timing that ResNet puts out there, you can see what the impact will be for all of your builders. And adding a few things around solar and some of the mandatory codes and programs check boxes. And that gets us pretty close to everything we have planned. And we'll be, at that point, starting to, taking a lot more requests on where this goes to help our users out. Robbie or Sue, should we wrap up, or?
If anybody else has any questions, then if you have any questions. Okay. All right. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
everybody.
We appreciate it.